Mr. Jeremić and Professor Jeremić. It's great to have you here in Beijing with us, and thank you for coming on Talk with World Leaders.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. It's a great pleasure to be back in Beijing.
We know our President Xi Jinping, recently made a trip to Serbia. That was, I believe, on the 7th and 8th of May. How do you assess the significance of this visit?
I think it was a historical visit, really. Serbia and China, we have enjoyed decades of very close cooperation.
Sure.
And we worked very closely together in multilateral arena. We had the great bilateral relationship, but this was really a peak. The symbolism of the Chinese president coming to Serbia on the first visit to Europe after COVID, picking France, Hungary, and Serbia, I think it was a very powerful message that speaks volumes of our relationship. Now they are officially elevated to the highest level so far, and working together towards a shared common future is something that I'm sure will be unfolding in the coming years. So our cooperation in the economic field, our cooperation in the field of culture, increasing human-to-human relations, person-to-person relations, educational relations. I think this is all going to accelerate in the coming years. When it comes to global diplomacy, I think that Serbia right now, probably the closest ally that China has in Europe. We are an independent country that works hand in hand with China in the international arena. And this visit of President Xi cemented this trajectory. Serbia is the first European country that signed up to the 3 global initiatives of China. The Global Initiative on Development, Global Initiative on Security, and Global Initiative on Civilization. We're very proud to have this strong, ironclad friendship, which I expect that this is just going to go from strength to strength.
Now, looking at this visit by our President Xi Jinping, now during the visit, I believe the 2 countries announced that they will be building a China-Serbia community with a shared future. What do you think key elements or key focus there need to be in order to build such a community with a shared future?
I think more focus on education need to be made. The studies of the Chinese language need to be enhanced. I was a foreign minister of Serbia at a time when we started the very first program of studying Chinese language in Serbia.
Tell us a bit more about that. What do you mean? How did you propose that and how that developed later on?
First of all, I became foreign minister on the same day when Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi became Foreign Minister of China. On the very same day we became, that was the 15th of May 2007, if I'm not mistaken. And we met very early on in our terms. I think it was September 2007. China was one of the first destinations that I visited. And then we started talking about various issues. And then I proposed that China send teachers to Serbia, and that we should introduce those teachers to primary schools. We started a number of other programs, including visa-free program, visa-free travel for citizens of Serbia and China to be able to travel between the 2 countries. At that time, there were a lot of skepticism that we're going to make it, but we did make it.
And I read in the news and I've seen in videos there are a lot of Chinese language signposting in Serbia. Is that true?
Yeah, there are. When you go there, some restaurants where you actually have a menu in Chinese as well.
And would you say there is growing interest by Serbian people to study the Chinese language?
Well, 100%, because everybody understands China is going to be one of the most important centers of gravity of the 21st century. Political, economic, technological. Probably one of the friendliest centers of gravity of the world to Serbia. In the 20th century, especially the second half of the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st century, speaking English, understanding how, for instance, American economy worked. It was huge comparative advantage, especially for those of us who were from the former socialist countries in Europe.
Right.
And Yugoslavia was one such country. Something similar is going to apply to the 21st century. Speaking Chinese is going to be a great advantage. Knowing about China, understanding China, culture and economy is going to be a big comparative advantage. That's my opinion.
How do you look at the mutual understanding between China and Serbia on issues such as sovereignty and territorial integrity? Because we have seen some Western nations, they are having a double standard. For example, they're using the Kosovo issue to pressure Serbia, while simultaneously they're using the Taiwan issue to try and contain China.
We're in that sense, they're not, they don't have double standards. They have the same standard, they pressure everybody. But of course, I know what you're trying to say. Part of the strength of our overall friendship comes from our mutual understanding when it comes to issues related to protection of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Sure.
We both have challenge in this regard. Ours is most notoriously manifested in Kosovo, which unilaterally declared independence from Serbia in 2008. Unfortunately, was recognized by a number of mostly Western countries in direct violation of international law, in direct violation of Serbia's constitution. Serbia was warning the international community at that time, and I was actually the person who led this charge as a foreign minister at that time. China was very strongly supportive of Serbia's position back then, mindful of its own challenges with regards to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, first and foremost in the context of Taiwan. And Serbia is fully reciprocating this kind of support. Serbia fully supports One China policy. This is an internal issue for China, for the Chinese people to decide how to go about their natural peaceful reunification.
You were formerly President of the UN General Assembly, and I believe you are well positioned to comment on the following question I'm about to ask. Now, there recently a surge of attempts to challenge the authority of the UN Resolution 2758. What are your comments on these efforts?
I think these are just calls to try and irritate China, to provoke China into acting in a way that it could be used against in the wider context of international relations. International law is very clear in this regard, and the position of the People's Republic of China is, in the international institutions, is immovable. China is a permanent member of the Security Council, so it is very, very clear whose word is going to be the last on issues related to China and One China and everything else of that sort. So my opinion is that in the future there may be other initiatives aimed at provoking China. But I'm sure that the strategic patience that has always characterized Chinese foreign policy and Chinese philosophy going to be kept.
Now, we've also seen recently the UN General Assembly voted to establish the International Day of Commemoration in memory of the Srebrenica victims. Serbia voted against that resolution.
This was a very unfortunate resolution that was ill-conceived. The resolution was being prepared in secrecy by some member states of the United Nations, and the key co-sponsors, led by Germany, basically surprised Serbia and surprised the rest of much of the world, right? By coming out with this resolution on the 29th anniversary of the end of the war in Bosnia, allegedly aiming to push this resolution in order to help reconciliation in Bosnia and in the rest of the region.
What is it achieving, do you think?
I think
What's
it is achieving the complete opposite. So I don't think the intentions were to help reconciliation. opposite happened. Now tensions are very high in the Balkans as a result of this resolution. This issue has further geopoliticized the relations in the region. But geopolitics, in my opinion, was the main driver of this resolution. I think this resolution was conceived to actually punish Serbia for its independent foreign policy. We are one of very few countries in Europe that are continuing to proudly conduct independent foreign policy. And this is not something that is appreciated or liked by the key EU member states, led by Germany. So this was an attempt to punish Serbia. This attempt backfired on them because resolution was adopted. Although adopted, it was a Pyrrhical victory. It was adopted with a very, very low number of votes. And some very important countries voted together with Serbia against this resolution, and China was one of them. Russia was another. I think it shouldn't come as a surprise that Russia and China are so popular in Serbia. And this vote was one of the reasons why this positive impression in Serbia on China and Russia even intensified after this resolution.
Will Serbia join the EU?
I personally don't think it is going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen in the near future, for sure. I think it might never happen, but you know, never is a very strong word, right?
Right.
But what I'm sure is that it is not going to join EU in the near future for a number of reasons.
Why would you say that?
Well, there's this issue of Kosovo that is dividing us. Now the EU has formally made recognition of Kosovo, or de facto recognition of Kosovo, one of the prerequisites for Serbia to join the EU, one of the preconditions. It has yet to be formally adopted, but this will be adopted this year. Serbia will never recognize Kosovo. And if there is a formal requirement that we recognize, we're just not going to be able to fulfill it. Not this government, not any future government will do that. But that's just one of the reasons. The first reason is Serbia specific. There is a reason, in my opinion, why there'll be no further enlargement of the European Union, at least not until there is a change of decision-making system in the European Union. Because right now, according to the Lisbon Treaty, every country has a power of veto. Every member has a power of veto in the European Council. And that has not worked always perfectly well for the European Union. And I don't think that they are going to be ready to accept any new members with the veto power before this veto is somehow changed. Now, it's not going to be easy to change the decision on de facto killing the veto, because the decision to kill the veto is subject to veto. And I'm sure that there will be countries that would not be willing to accept that. So, for internal reasons of the European Union, for specific reasons of Serbia, for the wider geopolitical reasons in which the European continent is going to go through more, or not less, turbulence in the coming years and decades, in my opinion, Serbia's membership in the EU is not terribly likely.
Following the shooting of the Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, I think there were reports that your president also received some threats. Reports suggest this is linked to their stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. How do you look at these incidents?
It's a very, very sensitive thing in Serbia because we unfortunately have a history of political violence, including a recent history. One of our former leaders was assassinated. Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić was assassinated in 2003. Therefore, we are deeply disturbed by the news. There was an attempt at life of Prime Minister Fico, who is, by the way, a very close friend of Serbia. Slovakia, under his leadership, cemented the foreign policy of, for instance, not recognizing Kosovo as an independent state. Prime Minister Fico has been one of the moderate voices when it comes to relations with Russia, and so is Serbia. So we felt really, really in deep state of shock. Unfortunately, the politics of Europe, the domestic politics in many European countries, is becoming so divisive And it's becoming so charged with hate. And such things happen. And I fear that if there is no change of trajectory in European politics, that we're going to see more challenges and more instances of political violence in our part of the world. And that is very, very disturbing and very concerning for us.
Now, many say the Russia-Ukraine conflict has entered into a new phase. Do you think the Western sanctions against Russia, for example, have been successful?
Completely opposite of that. They've been exceptionally unsuccessful. And I think everybody understands this and knows this. Russian economy is doing much better than before the sanctions. The numbers are there. I mean, Russian economy is growing at a rate higher than the economies of the countries that impose sanctions on Russia. Russian economy is also strategically changing focus towards Eurasia from Europe. I'm not sure if this is working in the best interest of those who have imposed the sanctions. There's also an additional consideration, which I think it's not insignificant. The fact that the sanctions failed undermined the supremacy of the US dollar. De facto monopoly of the US dollar in the world, in the financial world, was one of the, I'd say, important pillars of American domination in the past decades. So the fact that America, first and foremost, followed by Europe, but America first and foremost, introduced such drastic sanctions on Russia, it was supposed to mean the end of Russian economy, and Russia survived. And therefore, they proved that it is actually possible to do economically well without access to the US dollar. And I think this is a strategic development. It is going to accelerate the setting up of alternative thinkings, alternative platforms in terms of world flows of money. This is going to prove in the future that the historians of the future are going to point to this particular war and sanctions that were placed on one of the actors in this war, in a way the beginning of an end of American dollar supremacy in the world.
You were the youngest foreign minister of Serbia, and I think the youngest foreign minister at the time of your country and in the world.
And in the world, at that time in the world.
At that time
Later
in
on,
the
some
world.
people came who were younger.
You visited China many times now throughout your career. What significant changes have you observed during your visits to China? And recently as well.
I visited China so many times. Very early on, I think the first time it was 2005 that I visited. So next year is going to be the 20th anniversary of my coming to China. And of course, things changed immensely. The development, very difficult to describe how comprehensive and how strong this development was. The change in the attitude of Chinese towards the world have also changed. I think that China is now much more of a globally disposed actor than it was back then. But what I found very interesting was the change in China in the last 5 years. And I realized when I came into the street that there's something extremely weird. That I cannot tell what was this weird feeling about. And it took me 3 minutes to realize what it was.
What was it?
Heavy traffic that you cannot hear. That was something that was wrong.
Right.
So heavy traffic, but most of the vehicles being electric.
Right.
This is not something you can see in Europe. This is not something you can see in America.
Right.
So that was the weird thing, because traffic was heavy and you could hear people talking to each other in the street. So that was the one thing. Second thing, I went to the department store to buy some presents for my daughter, and then came to the cashier. And I tried to pay with my MasterCard. And the lady was watching the MasterCard, did not know what to do with the MasterCard. She's like, I cannot do this. I said, well, I don't have anything else.
Right.
She's like, do you have Alipay? I said, no. Do you have WeChat? I said, I have WeChat, but just for chatting, not for paying, right? So she sent me to the financial office. They helped me in the financial office. I could pay, but
Right.
it was like such a drastic difference from
It's completely
China.
cashless here.
Completely
It's
cashless society.
No
It's-
one carries a wallet.
It's
You
amazing.
just carry your phone.
Yes,
It's
indeed.
so convenient. Yes.
So it shows how fast the pace of technological development is.
Yes.
And I think that China is leading the world at this moment when it comes to this.